Be still, my soul, the Lord is on your side.
Hola y bienvenidos al cuarto video en el repaso por el verano para la clase de Señor Pelo de SGES. Thank you very much for tuning in to the fourth video in this review series for the summertime new students of Spanish at St. George's Episcopal School with Bishop Bello's Spanish class. This video is going to be concerning nouns and how each noun in Spanish is assigned a gender that may seem random on the surface and actually is random when you really get down to it. Just throw a couple of examples at you. El bolígrafo. El bolígrafo. La pluma. La pluma. El piso. El piso. La puerta. La puerta. Okay, so notice we have four examples, and then of course there's only four examples here, but these are very indicative of what you'll see as you go through your speaking Spanish. Now, notice how we have some that have the word el in front of them, and some that have the word la in front of them. Now, el and la both mean the same thing. They both mean the. El is the, but it's masculine. La is the, but it's feminine. So for instance, like we said before in the previous video, if we were to talk about maybe a teacher, and the teacher was a man, we would call him el profesor, or if you wanted to get technical, el maestro. If it was a teacher who was a lady, we would call her la profesora, or we would also call her la maestra. Now notice two things about these examples that I put up earlier. Notice how all the words that have L in front of them have the letter O at the end, and all the words that have La in front of them end with the letter A. That's usually a good indicator as to what precise gender these particular nouns have been assigned. Sometimes it's easier to tell. For instance, el chico and la chica. El chico is boy, obviously it's masculine. La chica is girl, obviously it's feminine. But el bolígrafo is a pen. And it's for some reason it's masculine. Yet la pluma is another word for pen, and it's also feminine. So you have a word for the same object, inanimate object, which has no gender whatsoever in real life, but it's been assigned a gender for grammatical purposes. We'll get into those grammatical uses later in a different video, but for now, just know that if ever you see a word that ends with O, normally it will have the word L in front of it, insofar as it would have any definite article at all. If you see a word ending with the letter A, it's probably feminine, and it probably is going to have la in front of it. Now there are some exceptions. The first ones that come to mind is la mano, el mapa, el agua, la moto. Now there are some reasons why these words would have L or la in front of them, but suffice it to say, for the most part, they're just exceptions to the rule. You might say they're the exceptions that prove the rule, because you see these things, and as you go through your Spanish education, you'll find that's a little bit odd. It's a little bit strange. Why would they be that? Now, in terms of using your definite articles, in English we have one definite article. We have the word the. The word the is the only definite article. It's like, well, which marker do we need? We need the orange marker. Not a orange marker, but the orange marker. In a similar vein, we have we have the markers, we have the marker. It's the same whether or not what we're describing is singular or plural. In Spanish, however, we use different articles when we're describing plural things. For instance, if I were saying not the pen, but the pens, I would say either los bolígrafos or las plumas. If I were talking about the different floors in a building, I might say los pisos, or the different doors in a building, I might say las puertas. So here we have los for things that are plural and masculine, and las that are for things that are plural and feminine. So let me just put the four definite articles on the screen here. We've got el, la, los, and las. All four of these words mean the same thing when you translate them to English, but they're used in specific and important ways. El, la, los, las. El and la are both singular, but el is masculine and las feminine. Los and las are both plural, but los is masculine and las is feminine. So when you use those and when you don't use those, that's the key to really sounding like a real native speaker. That's the key to really understanding how to sound fluent when you speak Spanish, knowing when to put el, la, los, and las. It's still confusing to even a seasoned speaker, and even to people who've lived in different countries for a long time. It can still be confusing, but it's one thing to have an early start on that. Now there are words that don't end in o or a, and for the most part, whenever you see those, you'll probably have just to memorize whether or not they have L or La in front of them. For instance, words that end with E. There are all sorts of words that end with E that don't have any specific rule as far as what they have. For instance, la leche, el papalote, el cacahuete, la serpiente. Again, these don't really have any rhyme or reason as to why they have L or La in front of them. Someone just decided they would be. Well, in fact, no one really decided they would be, and there really is no answer to that question, why? Why is this feminine, that masculine, when there could be any number of reasons why they wouldn't be one way or the other. The thing is, these have sort of sprung up from different interactions amongst people for tens of thousands of years. So there really is no answer to the question, why? Why do they do this when we don't do that? There really is no easy answer to that. However, there are some interesting rules as to figuring out the gender of that don't end with O or A. These words also tend to be what's called cognates. Cognates are a very useful tool. Cognates are words that sound alike in both English and Spanish, or really any two languages. Cognates are words that sound alike because they have similar roots. Now, if you didn't know already, the language of Spanish is what's called a Romance language. Romance languages are languages that are based off of Latin. Latin, of course, is what the Romans spoke, so the word romance doesn't necessarily have anything to do with romance itself, romantic things, but simply it's because that's what the Romans spoke. So we have a bunch of languages that descended from Latin, including French. And if you didn't know, back in the early days of the English language, the Anglo-Saxons who spoke a sort of form of German were conquered by the French. And the French brought over a lot of their language back in the 11th century. And so now we have a lot of words that come from Latin because they came from French. So you'll see a lot of these words that sort of mean the same thing, and you can almost kind of sort of see the similarity, but only if you kind of search your mind a little bit. So let's start off with my favorite one is the suffix DAD or TAD. DAD and TAD, if you think about them, they can always be replaced with the letters TY, and you'll have your translation into Spanish. And these almost are always feminine. So we have words like la universidad, la comunidad, la sociedad, la libertad. And again, if you put these into their plural form, oftentimes all you gotta do is simply add the suffix es. So we have las universidades, las sociedades, las comunidades, las libertades. So again, if you just take off that DAD and you add TY, you've got your word. Liberty, community, university. That's a really useful tool. Another useful tip is whenever you see words that end with the letters C-I-O-N, and that O has an accent mark on it, then usually you can replace that C with a T, take off the accent mark, and you'll have your word in English. And again, these words are almost always feminine. So we have words like la emoción, la civilización, la nación, la jubilación. Now, again, we just add es and we'll have our word. So we have las naciones, las jubilaciones, las emociones, or las condiciones. So another useful tip is the suffix OR, or the words ending with OR. They can usually be translated directly from English to Spanish, directly from Spanish to English, and they almost always have the word el in front of them. All right? So for instance, we have el doctor, el profesor, el motor. Other words. And again, all we gotta do is we add the es and we can make those things plural. So we have el doctor or los doctores. Let's take a look at a couple of these words and let's see if we can figure out whether or not they would be feminine or masculine based on what we just found out. Pizarra. Pizarra. That would be feminine, right? We would say la pizarra. Traductor. Traductor. That would be masculine, right? El traductor. How about banderas? Banderas. Right, that's the plural form of the word bandera, which is feminine. So we would say las banderas. Hermandad. Hermandad. Right? That would be feminine. That would be la hermandad. Because it ends with dad, we know that hermandad is feminine. Right, so we'll talk more about turning words from singular to plural in a different video down the line. But for now, remember that there are 4 different types of definite articles in Spanish: el, la, los, and las, and they're used in very different ways. When a word is singular, we'll use el or la. When a word is plural, we'll use los or las. All right. Well, thanks again for listening. Check your paper and see if you can't do some of those problems that are down there, and then just scan it with your QR reader, and you will be able to figure out whether or not you get them right. All right. So tune in next time, and we'll talk more Spanish. In the meantime, sigue hablando español. Keep talking Spanish.